Hello, it's Tony here again. It's been a little while since we've had a video, so it's time for another new aircraft. I've got a couple of videos lined up that I'm going to probably record over the next couple of days, and this is the first of them, the Douglas DC-3. Let's have a quick look at what we've got here. So we've got a couple of air manager panels. As with all of these analog or steam gauge type of aircraft, they do require a lot of work to make the panels, because obviously you've got to make all the individual elements, all the individual instruments and gauges, and they've got lots of switches and controls and individual gauges for the engine, especially on this one because it's a twin, so you've got a lot of either dual needle or in a lot of aircraft you get two lots of the same instrument. So yeah, there's a lot of work in doing these analog instruments, but it's been fun along the way. I've been doing this one for quite a while. What with everything else, I didn't quite finish off the last aspects of it, so I've just managed to do that over the last couple of weeks, and so it's time probably to show off the Douglas DC-3, and hence that's why we're here. Probably not going to do much of a flight today because I'm in the process of swapping over my my sim PC, so I'm mix and match between one and the other. So I've got some controls on there, and so I haven't even got a Knobster today, and I haven't got much in the way of flight controls either. So we'll probably just fire up, get the engine running, so at least we can see some of the needles and gauges going. But that'll give me a chance to talk through what we've got here for the Douglas DC-3. So I've got three different variants. I suppose they are three different variants, but effectively they're five different variants of panels. So we'll get the one that makes the odd five up, and then we'll talk about the other four. So the odd one, or the fifth one if you like, or the first one, whichever way you want to look at it, is for the X-Plane DC-3. So I try and make a lot of these panels so they're capable for both sims. So depending on whatever sim you're operating or you're running, or if you're like me, you jump back between the two. The two meaning the two primary simulators that we have in 2023 being Microsoft Flight Sim and X-Plane 11 or 12, depending on if you've made the upgrade to 12 or not yet. So this not this panel that we're looking at here, but one of the panels is for the X-Plane variant. So there's a freeware version of the DC-3 by AWX AeroWorks, and they've done a really nice job on that DC-3. So I thought it was only right, in keeping with my trying to do the panels. I can't always do that, but trying to do a panel for both sims, if there is an aircraft in both. Then I'll try and make it capable of both. And so I chose, there is another DC-3, or there might even be two, I think, for X-Plane, but this was, I thought, albeit being freeware, was the best one. So I chose to make it capable with the AWX. That's not to say that it wouldn't be capable with any other one if it was using standard commands and data refs in X-Plane, because pretty much all of the commands and data refs that are used on the X-Plane side are just standard ones. So it would pretty much any of these instruments would pretty much work with standard ones because of that reason. It's only really the custom ones, when they start using custom data refs and whatnot, that it'll only work with that one aircraft. But these ones are pretty standard, so they would work with other ones probably as well, although I'm not going to go and check all of those, or at least not unless there's popular demand for it. I felt that it was enough to support the three different versions of aircraft that I'm currently supporting, which I'll talk about the other two in a minute. So that's the first panel set, and then the other four panel sets that make up the five are two each of the Microsoft Flight Sim DC-3. So these are default Microsoft Flight Sim DC-3, and there's a classic and a retrofit version of that. So the panel we're looking at here is the retrofit one. You can see there's a GNS 530 here, and a GNS 430, and a KAP 140 autopilot. Well, effectively the rest of the panel is pretty much the same. There's some slight, smaller few differences between this retrofit version, but the classic version takes these out. Obviously, doesn't give you these luxuries of a GPS, and it puts in a Sperry gyro pilot in this location and some older style Navcom radios over on this right-hand slot. So that's pretty much the classic and the retrofit variants. So that takes 2 panels up. So that's now we're up to 3 with the X-Plane 1 and the default classic and retrofit. And then we have the same classic and retrofit, but for the popular Duckworks mod, also for the Microsoft Flight Sim aircraft. So that sits on top of, if you've got the Duckworks mod installed, which I have, and many others also have. It does add quite a bit to the default aircraft, so it gives you extra functionality and some slight difference. Slightly nicer to operate with the Duckworks mod, in my opinion. Your mileage might vary, and that's why I've done both basically. So there are a few differences, which is why they needed to be separate panel sets. So there's 5 panel sets effectively in there. 2 for the standard aircraft, the classic and the retrofit. 2 for the Duckworks, again the classic and the retrofit, and the X-Plane version for the AWX DC3. So that's pretty much it. So that's a lot of panels. A lot of the instruments are common between them, but there are a few differences. The X-Plane one has a few different ones, so I've been faithful to that model and put the instruments that it uses into its panel. A lot of this is common, engine gauges and flight gauges and whatnot, but there are a few differences to the way they've modelled each of the aircrafts in each of the sims. So I guess without further ado, we ought to go ahead and look at some of the features of these panels. While we're in this view at the moment, looking at both the panels, we can have a quick look at the pop-up panel. So you can see there's each one has a big overhead, which is up sort of above each of the windshield positions, a switch panel on the right side and the left side. And in the left side one, I've incorporated the ignition and the altitude limit switch. And close them off for a minute. The usual compass, you've seen that 1,000 times if you've watched any of my videos before. There's a fire panel here that you can open and operate the controls beneath. And there's also a hydraulics panel. Now the hydraulics panel is the one that's sort of like between the seats on the side of just over on the co-pilot side on the side of the a bit of the structure there with all the hydraulics controls on there, and so these enable you to you can touch the hub there and operate the switch to change over to the other position for the hydraulic selector. We can move that back there. You can open the valves here. Yeah, same with this one. That is flaps. And then the one at the bottom is, you have to have that unlatched. That's your landing gear. And then you've got a hand pump over there. I think that's to be open for the hand pump to work. There we go. So the hand pump. And you just saw the gear latch. So that's all of those hydraulic controls. That was quite a bit of work. Mainly on the graphics side, but getting that all working as it does in the sim. And that there isn't one of those in the X-Plane version because none of that is modelled. All those controls are static as far as I can tell, but if ever they get them working, then I could add that functionality in because obviously it's already there and sitting there, but there is no hydraulic panel on the X-Plane one simply because it's not needed. So yeah, at the moment they're pop-up panels. I mean, that's quite a lot of real estate to use. You only need to use it infrequently, which is why it's easier to have it as a pop-up. But I guess if you had another display, which is eventually my plan, you can either still use it as a pop-up on the main panel here like this. It's quite functional, or you can there's a user property for these pop-up items, particularly the larger ones, where you can disable and not make it pop up anymore, so it stays permanently visible. So you can move that to another monitor, for instance, if you wanted to have that permanently up, and just turn off the show hide capability for it, so it's permanently on. So that's a nice useful way of you know, reconfiguring the panels if you want to for you know, a slightly different setup to what I've got here. But the basis is that I try to make it work on the two screens because I know that's predominantly what most people have. I know there's a few users that are still using one screen. I feel for you guys. And I know some of you have got very creative with moving some of these instruments around to make that work on a single screen layout. Sometimes you have to make them a bit smaller. I know some of you have got a slightly larger monitor, maybe a 27-inch, maybe non-touch. But whatever you've got in terms of your setup, you can make them work obviously by resizing the instruments and dragging them around and changing the layouts. But I can't say enough about having a couple of 20 to 24-inch is around the optimum, I would say, somewhere in that range, 20 to 24-inch size of two monitors side by side. For a GA aircraft, at least, gives you a nice sort of size of if you put them side by side, it gives you a feel that it's around about the same sort of size as an instrument panel. So for an aircraft of that sort of GA class, and so therefore you tend to find that most of the instruments are pretty much around about 1-to-1 in terms of their sizing. For that amount of real estate, yes, of course, you have to have pop-up items for things that are not on the instrument panel, or you have to display them on another monitor if you so wish to do so. So anyway, without further ado, I guess what we ought to do is get some power on this thing. So what we're going to need for that is the pop-up panels. So we'll leave it in dual view for a moment because we kind of need a mixture of both sides at the moment, and then we'll perhaps have a look at more details of each of the instruments. We'll zoom into the individual panels and have a look at them. So I think we'll go over onto the battery cart. I'm running this on a mouse here today because I haven't got my knobster, so it's probably easier for me to operate the dials and whatnot. For instance, the fuel selector here and the one on the other side. And we're going to turn our fuel on and make sure our park brake is on. We're going to I think we can pre-prime, so you can see these gauges are at 0 at the moment. We'll turn the overhead off, and I think we can open that valve. We can crank that hand pump 5 or 6 times. We should get our there you go, there's our needles have come up now on the hydraulic pressure, so that should give us at least hydraulics so that we can open the cowl flaps, which there already are anyway, but they will at least drive the flaps to the open position because we now have hydraulics for that. So you can do that if we so wish. We're in the correct position there. If we were going to take off, or probably not. We'll just turn some of these things on because they may not have been on with this first panel being on. Probably could do with turning our ignitions on as well. You'd only normally have to do the turning these radios and things on the first time you use it, and then it will remember them. Unless of course you turn them off again after the flight, then it remembers that too. But if you turn them on and leave them on, they'll just come on when the avionics power comes on. So we have battery power on. We'll have our beacon light on. Don't need too much of that. Okay, so we have ignition. Okay, don't need the generators yet. Right, so we'll give it a little bit of right engine first. Give it a bit of prime. Doesn't look like we've got fuel pressure. What am I missing? Not following a checklist here, just doing it from memory. I haven't flown this for a little while. I've got a feeling it's not going to start. We'll give it a try anyway, but I've got a feeling those oh, have I got the wrong version of the aircraft loaded while I was testing and whatnot? I can't remember if I've still got the correct version of the aircraft loaded. We'll soon find out. Oh, there we go. Oh, I know what I didn't do. It's silly Billy, aren't I? Of course. I didn't. I said, because I haven't got my throttle in. I did say I was struggling for flight controls. I would normally have I've turned them forward. They're sitting here, but they're not connected to this computer, because I've said I've got a bit of a mixture between the two. So what I need to do is, this is why I like Air Manager so much, interacting with this stuff. Not that you use Air Manager for this, but interacting with anything in the virtual cockpit is such a chore. There we go. Crack those as well a little bit while we're here. Okay. Let's try that again. Okay. Prime again on the right. Right. Oh, there we go. We have a good start on the right engine. Number 2 is there marked on these dual needles. You can see the 2 needles now. One's come out from hiding behind the other one. I must say, aircraft instrumentation, these dual ones, I never like them that much because of the overlapping nature of them. I know that you get the full display then by doing that and sharing it by having 2 different needles. These ones are not staggered, which is, again, is a bit rare. I don't know if that's this aircraft model or that's how they used to do it, but generally they're staggered, so at least the 1 and the 2, or the L and the R, what you tend to get, the little tags that they have on the needles here are staggered a little bit, so at least you can still see the tag sticking out from behind the other one. But I don't know, something about these dual ones that I think I prefer, because you get individual needles from, so you can immediately see left and right. We'll go for a start on the left. Got to do the prime. Mesh. And then we'll give it. And there comes the left engine. We'll have the generators on. Keep those boost pumps on just while we're on the ground. That's a tendency if the RPM's a little bit low, that they're just equalising now. You can the engine can quit on you. You can see the ammeters there at the top, and the volts gauge as well there. All these switches are working, and so I had to do 3 different versions of both of these. This is why I said it was a lot of work. Both of these, all of these switch panels, they're all subtly different. So the default Microsoft aircraft is the DuxWorks adds a few different extra things. So the switch panel layouts are different for both of them. The X-Plane one's different again. So yeah, I've got literally, it's the same same left instrument, the same right instrument in terms of the overhead panels, but there's 3 different variants depending on which aircraft you're operating that you select via user property. Yeah, it's it was a lot of work just to configure those, but anyway, it was worth it. Nice set of panels. What I forgot to do is just turn the avionics on. We'll have the ship's battery on there and the battery cart off. So the avionics is on now, coming on. And so I guess that gives us a chance to talk about each of the panels. So we'll have a quick look at the left side first. We've had a look at the overhead panel already. You've seen quite a bit of that, and the pop-up compass, of course. So we've got here on the left side. Let's just bring that other view back up again, because I'm just going to show these. I'm just going to show these wiper controls up the top here, so you can just see. There we go with the wiper. I can just click it a bit more and go faster. Turn the wiper on and we can go a bit slower. The thing about this one is that, like one of those old cars, we have to get it in sync at the right point. When you turn it off, it doesn't go automatically back to the park position. So when you turn it off, you have to make sure. See, I just missed it there. You have to make sure it's actually in the spot where you want it to park when you turn it off. A little bit of fun. You can just have a game just playing that. Oh, I missed it again, but I'm not going to do it again. And there's the same identical one for the right. That does the right side one. So they're all working. Let's go back to the left side panel. I just wanted you to see the wiper. So we've got a clock up here. In the X-Plane one, there's a knob on here, so you can adjust the time and airspeed. Obviously dedicated to the DC-3. It's in miles per hour, so you have to bear that in mind. An altimeter, then your compass. You can adjust there. Then you've got so many of these compasses or headings, and it takes a bit of getting used to. When I first flew the DC-3, especially navigating on VORs and whatnot, it's a bit more complicated. But I guess if you fly the DC-3, you already know that. But this replicates that. As in the simulated aircraft, so you get the same experience. As I say, some of these gauges are a little different depending on whether it's the X-Plane or the Microsoft Flight Sim variant, but it's essentially the same aircraft. So there's an artificial horizon there and a cage knob there. There's a marker beacon receiver with the indicators and the sensitivity switch there. This is your, I guess it's the equivalent of your DG, but it's not. It's a magnetic compass. This gives you in this retrofit version. This gives you your heading. This dial here that I'm rotating at the moment. This gives you your heading for the autopilot to follow. So that's effectively your heading bug. And then this needle here points to actually where you're pointing, so you can see we're kind of agreeing here. We're just a little bit right of east, a little bit to the right of east there, and you can see again just the other side of east on the compass up there. And the Sperry Gyropilot just adds another one of these, but they've got split. Yeah. It's pretty much the Air Manager instrument. It's the same as the model within the sim, so it operates in the same way. Turn and slip, VSI, not much to say about those. They're pretty standard. And then a set of DC-3 specific engine instruments. Again, slightly different between the sims. There's some different variations on these. I've had to make them so that they kind of represent each one within the sim, give or take. So some of them have got some features that the other ones don't have, or they've got slightly different markings or indications, particularly between the two different sims, the X-Plane and the Microsoft Flight Sim ones are a little different. So there's a bit of a you needed two types effectively within the same instrument, so it'll work correctly for each one. But yeah, they're a nice set of instruments. There you got some more low oil pressure lights that will go off when the needle gets up into the green. Probably haven't quite got enough RPM there to get that up, but hey ho. Fuel pressure, oil temperature, cylinder head temperature, carburetor ice. You can see we're in the yellow zone there, which is not good. So we can operate our carb temperature sliders there. We can get that temperature up into the green. There we go. That kind of goes hand in hand there with the sliders. And then I just realised you guys are not seeing that, so let's just do that again. You can just see there's there on the carb temperature. They were originally, the carb controls were originally all the way up, and you can see these needles are in the yellow there. So we're just giving it a bit of heat and give it full heat, full beans, or probably only enough there to keep us out of the yellow. Obviously as you're flying you just need to keep an eye on that. You don't want the carburetor icing over. We've got a fuel quantity gauge there, gives us our quantity for all the different tanks. You can cycle through those and that will give you the indication up there. You've seen these avionics before, pretty standard stuff. This is a slightly older style audio panel for this aircraft, but we've seen this older transponder in some other aircraft, ADF and transponder in some other older aircraft before. I guess they're relatively quite new for this. We had a quick look at the cow flaps controls, one for each engine obviously on each side, and then there's your landing gear indication, and then a way of opening the doors as well in the sim, so when they're up you can go outside the model and have a look at the outside of the aircraft, and that opens both of the doors. I think there's a third switch actually in the X-Plane 1 as well. What's that for in the X-Plane 1? Doors, maybe it might be chocks and covers and whatnot, I can't remember exactly. Anyway, there's a third switch on the X-Plane 1 that does something or another. Then an OAT gauge, prop de-ice, which I think is in op on the X-Plane version but not on the Microsoft one, so it's there, and hydraulic pressure, engine hydraulic pressure. And then the fuel selectors we had a look at. You can select the fuel coming from whatever tank you want, or you can turn it off, of course. We had a look at the carb heat controls there, and then this one here will lock him, so you can go there as a slider. Take it from me, I am actually trying to move them and it won't let you move them because this lock is on. You take the lock off and then you have the ability to slide it up and down. So I think that's just more of a in-flight. You don't want inadvertently to knock them or for them to vibrate out of their position, so there's a way of locking them in the position that you put them in. We had a look at the fire panel. That's just down in between the seats. There's some shut-off valves in there for cutting off oil and fuel and whatnot in the case of a fire. Then we have some trim indicators, so that's just your right and left trim indications, and I've just as a convenience thing more than anything else built in some buttons as well, some hidden buttons on each side of the gauge there, so basically you can also trim it just by touching each side of the gauge to adjust the needles there. So yeah, you've got rudder on this side and aileron on that side. Then we've got a parking brake, an elevator trim indicator, tail wheel lock, which gets used a fair bit, certainly for taxiing around and takeoff and after takeoff. I've been doing quite a bit of, or I did, I haven't found this for a while, but I was doing a bit of practice in taxiing around, just leaving it completely unlocked. But it does get a little bit twitchy on the runway with it unlocked. It's easier to actually have it locked on, but I guess the more you practice, the easier it is. And then a couple more controls here. The only reason I put some of these controls on, and I mean, you know, if you've got multiple axes and or you've got lots of buttons and switches on hardware, you might choose not to have those items on. You could take them off the panel if you wanted to, or you could just leave them there as a visual thing to let you know what the state is, but you can probably set some of those up using physical controls, but not everybody's got physical controls for, particularly in something like the DC3 where there's levers and knobs everywhere. You might not have enough access or enough switches or buttons to control all of that stuff. So I've give the option. I never put the, well, I say I never do. There's an exception to that on the TBM, because the throttle is a little peculiar on the TBM, shall we say, in terms of setting up the control, because it has that sort of H gate arrangement, if you're familiar with the TBM. But generally I don't put mixture throttle or prop controls on any of the panels, because I figure, you know, it's the same as flight controls, rudder or anything else like that. You don't put them on a panel. People are going to have controls for those, or a way, a means of controlling those already, and so they're not on the panel, and I tend not to put the other controls. But things like this that are sort of outside of that, on a lot of these older aircraft where they have lots of levers for various things, and this DC3's particularly got a lot. I mean, there's 3 just on the carb heat controls there, and you can see there's another 1 on the tail wheel lock there, and another 2 for the superchargers, with the supercharger ones. So yeah, there's lots of controls. So I whizzed around there and I've sort of come back, and we're kind of coming along this bottom row again now. So there's another fuel selector just for the left hand side engine. This is a CDI. You notice there's no knob on it. Well, like a traditional CDI would have a knob for you to dial your OBS. Well, you dial your OBS over on this instrument on the far left here. So there's a switch here to toggle between 1 and 2. There you go. So those knobs control 1 and 2, and there's a switch to control which source the autopilot flies, I believe it is. Yes, I think that's correct. I say it's been a while since I've last flown this. And then, yeah, so you dial the OBS, and then the indication here is reflected on this these lateral and vertical needles of the CDI. You've still got the dots and whatnot of the traditional CDI display, but that's about all you get. You get the deviation here. You actually dial the OBS in over here. That's the quirk of the DC3, and probably other era of that aircraft of that era. Then we've got a radio altimeter, or at least the indicator for as part of the radio altimeter system. You dial in the let's bring up the overhead panel again. You dial in the there you go. You can see the height there. So your decision height, or your altitude limit as they call it in the DC3. This is the altitude limit switch that I'm adjusting here on the overhead, and that adjusts the position at which the altitude warning light, this one here, will come on. We're below that at the moment, so the light's on. So you can adjust that accordingly. The one in the sim is a little, yeah, that they've used. It's not implemented properly. So this is implemented properly. So the number that you get on the dial there, you see it says it's pointing to 250 feet, and you can see that it is at 250 feet. In the sim, they've allowed you to, I think, adjust it all the way up to 500 feet or whatever it is, even though that then doesn't match the scale that's on this altitude limits, which I chose not to do that, and to make these numbers match with the numbers on there, just so it's a little less confusing. But anyway, that's the radio altimeter. Then we have a radio compass next to that. So we've got this is tied into. You could consider this your ADF indicator if you want. So when you dial in your ADF, you can just manually rotate the compass card to match your compass, and then this needle will point. Well, it will point anyway. This needle will point to where the station is if you're receiving something on the ADF. So that's just it's like an ADF indicator with a card that you manually rotate. It's not slaved or anything. And then at the end here, I explained about the OBS function with the knobs here that's linked to the CDI here, but these are also indicators for your VOR bearings. So again, you can dial in your OBS, and then these needles will point to the VOR station. So kind of, you get some instruments where you can get an RMI that's got a VOR and an ADF built into the same instrument. It's kind of what these two separate instruments are, in effect. But you've also got this OBS knob in here that would normally be on the CDI. So it's all in the aircraft, but it's all laid out slightly different and a little bit quirky, which is a bit of fun learning the new ways that it works and interpreting the indications that the instruments are giving you. But so there was a bit of fun and games doing that. And then on the fully on the left hand side, which was actually the first instrument that I did, I sort of started here and worked my way across, was the flaps indicator. So the flaps indicator obviously just moves accordingly depending on what flap settings you have adjusted. So that is the Douglas DC-3 panel set as best as I can run through and explain it. They're a very nice set of panels and instruments. It was a lot of work creating them all. Lots of controls there to control anything you'd need in the Douglas DC-3 without a mouse. So you can sit back, use your touch screens or your Knobster, however you like to control, and you can bring up things like the hydraulic panel that we touched on earlier, or the fire panel. You hope you don't need that in an emergency. You can check your fuel over here with a knob, and you can adjust your cowl flaps and your superchargers, which is useful if you're going high altitude, and your carb heats and whatnot, and keep an eye on all your instruments and your navigation as well. So yeah, you've got a nice set of instruments to be able to do that and fly the DC-3. She's a handful anyway, so it's nice that you've got everything that you need on the panel here, and you can concentrate on flying the aircraft, and you can see all the indications all the time, keeping your eyes out the window and having a scan of your instruments inside. So you've got a nice couple of panels or sets of instruments on this panel to fly. So they are the panel sets. Like I said, I've got another probably one aircraft coming up after this one to show, and so needless to say that these ones, along with anything else that I've shown videos for, will probably at some point come to the store. So keep an eye out for them. They'll probably be coming at some point soon. But I thought it was about time that we got a video out there, so at least some of you can start having a look at the set of instruments for the Douglas DC-3. Thanks for watching. See you again soon. Thanks. Bye.